And we are back. Episode 3 of the This Week in Overwatch League podcast is a go with your boy ATP. If you're checking out this podcast for the first time, what we do is highlight and give our thoughts on the most recent week of the 2023 Overwatch League season, going over the big games, the biggest points of interest, the headlines, the storylines, and things to maybe look forward to heading into future weeks as well. This time around, we're talking about Week 4. Which was maybe a bit more tame in comparison to Week 3, but still pretty entertaining and definitely not boring, and I say that for two specific reasons. One is because we witnessed history in the making in the APAC region, obviously. We got to see Contenders teams join the fray in the knockouts and compete against Overwatch League teams, which was pretty hype, and we also learned some helpful information in the West based on the results that can be applied moving forward. So where I wanted to begin today's video slash podcast, I guess I should say, is with the APAC, because I think the knockouts in the East were generally more interesting. A lot of people were paying more attention to that than the West, which was a lot more predictable. So what I'd like to say first and foremost about the APAC knockouts is they were better than anticipated here in the first week. I really didn't know what to expect. Coming into it, I thought there was no guarantee that the Tier 2 teams would stand up to the L teams. I thought if upsets and craziness happen, it'd be in future weeks after this first one. But they did, in fact, play very, very well. Like, the first few games of Saturday weren't that great. They were all blowouts. But from the final Saturday game until the end of Sunday, we had some pretty big-time banger matches. And if a few things go differently in terms of fights and maps, we could have been looking at a couple of more upsets or 5-map affairs. Don't look at Seoul Dynasty versus Hangzhou Spark. That one's not so important. It's mostly the Contenders versus alexyOWL teams that I'm talking about in this specific instance. So despite what the scores might say here, I think a good number of these matches were very competitive. I mean, we have the obvious things here, right? Sin Priza defeating Shanghai Dragons, and O2 Blast nearly defeating Seoul Infernal. I thought that O2 Blast, SBG, and Pokerface all did very well this weekend and should feel very proud and should probably have some confidence heading into these other weeks with a chance to maybe do better and get back on the right track and still potentially be in the running to make it out of the knockouts and actually play in the midseason madness as a Tier 2 team. Where I wanted to begin, though, is probably with the match that everyone's been talking about, that being Seoul Infernal versus O2 Blast. It's been the talk of the town. This game was absolutely insane. If you missed it, go ahead, do yourself a favor and watch it. It was a banger of a matchup. These guys fought tooth and nail all series long. It started off with Infernal going up 2-0, but then O2 Blast roared all the way back, showing that they're not to be underestimated, and they nearly reverse swept. They were so close. It came down to a third round on control in map 5 to decide this thing. O2 Blast were extremely impressive. Some people might say that it's a bad thing that these Overwatch League teams are not doing too well or even losing to Tier 2 teams. It makes the league and them look bad. But I would disagree. I actually think it's great for the competition aspect. We don't have a lot of teams over there. Expanding the East makes it more interesting, more entertaining, less predictable. I think it's all just a big win in my book, so I'm glad they're doing it, and I'm glad the results so far have been fruitful at least through 1 week. O2 Blast in particular are showing why they're not to be trifled with, though. I kind of expected them to be like the best team in this thing, as most people did, but I did not expect them to push the Seoul Infernal as much as they did. I actually thought Infernal were going to win this 3-0 and show us why they are the best team in the East right now. But O2 Blast had other ideas. Maybe Seoul Infernal to a certain extent underestimated these guys, but these guys really came to play, and they deserve all the credit in the world for how they did it. They had a lot of mental resilience despite going down 2-0 in this series. They really fought hard, and their guys looked impressive. They're showing that they're a very respectable franchise, even at Overwatch League standards. They're well coached always. It's a great team system. Anyone over there can thrive. They know how to do it. They always pick the right players for their system. They're just very consistent. They have been for years now. And I really like how Marvel and Probe and Top Dragon played, and Knife, of course, he was insane. The backline was even consistent. Keeping up with Skewed and Fixa is no joke. It was all just a great overall team effort from those guys. Marvel, though, was my guy that I really loved watching. He showed that he's still Overwatch League caliber for sure. I was a little surprised when no teams picked him up because of how he did in the Valiant last year. So I'm glad that he's proving himself again and can maybe make it back into the league with performances like this, either at some point this season or in a future one, because he still looks AWL caliber. He's showing us that over and over again. He's amazing. He just needs the right help around him. He's flexible. He's smart. Always has been since 2019. Big fan of his, and I'm glad to see him doing well and pushing a guy like Mag to the brink. And the DPS line were also just crazy. They can compete with just about anyone over there in the East, which is saying something because there are some ridiculously good DPS lines. But Probe, Knife, and Top Dragon are crazy good players, and their potential is immense, and they're only going to get better from a tournament like this. Just a really great showing from O2 Blast, and I think there's a solid chance that they probably will be meeting Seoul Infernal again in the grand finals of the knockouts in like 2 weeks from now, I believe it is. Right now, they're going to have to do a loser's bracket run, but they should be in relatively good shape to make it through there. If they can push Seoul Infernal as far as they did, when right now they're like the best team in the East, then it stands to reason that no one else is going to stand in their way in that lower bracket. Like not even Dallas Fuel potentially, or Shanghai Dragons, or anyone along those lines. They're just stronger than those guys, and they should beat them no problem. In fact, they will be playing Shanghai Dragons first thing next weekend, and that could probably be a blowout in their favor, showing that they could probably be like a mid-tier Overwatch League team, or, you know, at the very least, they could be one of the better teams in the East if they were to compete over there full-time. Awesome stuff from O2 Blast, and I'm curious to see how Seoul Infernal do. Is this going to shake them to their core, or will it make them better? I'm at least proud of them for not choking. That's just a Philly Fusion thing to do usually, so good on them for not doing that. But definitely, they have some more cut out for them. They were peaking, and now all of a sudden, there's some concerns on their end. Now I think we're probably going to move into our other big game. I just talked about the Dragons, so we'll bring them up. Sinpriza Gaming taking down Shanghai Dragons, giving Tier 2 their first victory of the knockouts over an Overwatch League team. And this one went back and forth the entire way through. This was not like O2 Blast having to fight their way through like a almost reverse sweep. Sinpriza were just the better team from start to finish, really. I know the game was close, but I think their flexibility is what won them the day here. Shanghai, with the Fleta tank, they're very limited on what they can run, and I think Sinpriza abused that fact. And I'm happy for them, really. I didn't give them a big chance of beating Shanghai, just because Sinpriza were one of the lowest ranked teams to make it through the Tier 2 qualifiers. The roster is not as strong as it once was, like a couple of seasons ago in Contenders. But they went out there anyway and defined all the expectations, and they played great. It was very close, and they showed why they are one of the worst teams from Tier 2 for a reason, but they still did beat the Dragons, which is great. That is a great way to build confidence moving forward. Their guys did enough to get this win. I'm really happy for people like 2U, for example. They all looked great, and that carried over into the Dallas series to a certain extent. Not as close as in this one, and they did lose it, but, you know, they took a really close Shambali, showed they can be clutch. And Dallas, at least for a part of push, were struggling to get it going, and Blizzard World was back and forth. I'm very happy with how they're playing, and I'm curious to see how they do in the lower bracket. In terms of who they're going to be playing, first up will be Panthera. That should be an interesting matchup. They're pretty even on paper, but because they beat Shanghai, maybe they could beat Panthera too. I'm looking forward to see what Sinpriza can do heading into week 5. Yeah, so that's basically all I have to say with them. Sinpriza got an Overwatch League W. Shanghai Dragons, on the other hand, are looking mighty bad, and they honestly might be the worst team in this entire knockout thing, maybe aside from like Rhodes and maybe like Panthera and Dreamers, but they're one of the worst teams, definitely the worst Overwatch League team by far, with the results we have seen so far. And now they're playing O2 Blast next week. Shanghai are looking like they're going to go winless in the knockouts, which is pretty disappointing, but maybe not the most surprising thing in the world, considering what their current team is looking like. Really bad look on their part, though, and I'm hoping they at least put up some kind of fight against O2 Blast if they're going to go down next week. That's pretty much all of my thoughts on the Contenders teams and how they did in their big matchups with the Overwatch League in terms of like the map fivers. But we do have one other big point of interest. A lot of the teams didn't do that well, but I think Poker Face along with SBG and O2 Blast put up a good showing as well. They'll be the last team we talk about because they probably had one of the other biggest points of interest, like if individual moments in any series throughout the entire weekend in both regions. Because for one, they really did push the Guangzhou Charge pretty hard. I know it only went map 4, but most of these maps were pretty heavily contested. It's a bit worrying for Guangzhou Charge, as they were looking like the best team in the East a couple of weeks ago, and now people are maybe starting to question it. It's one thing to lose to Seoul Infernal in a close game, but it's a completely different thing to almost lose to a Contenders team. They held on, but I'm a little worried about their consistency, and I'm concerned they maybe peaked a little too early, and the meta's changing in a way that hurts them more than it helps them. We can talk about that another time, though. For now, I wanted to bring up Poker Face and how they did, for two reasons, really. For one, I do apologize, as I kind of doubted their roster. I'm not the biggest fan of people like Muse, Finale, and Valentine. I all thought they were just very mid in the Overwatch League, if I'm being honest with you. They've been very disappointing so far in their careers. I don't have a lot of faith in them to bounce back, but they've looked solid. They look like different players, and they've gotten a lot of help from Arrow as well. His hit scan abilities have looked excellent, and their combined might have made them a true threat that can actually potentially beat some of these good Overwatch League teams. If you can almost beat the Guangzhou Charge, you can pretty much beat just about anybody in this tournament in theory, which is great. But I'm wondering where their mental is at. That's my one thing. As the biggest part of this matchup and one of the biggest parts of the weekend came with perhaps one of the worst C9s we have seen in recent memory. There's a chance for Poker Face to win this game. They were very close. The ultimate economy was in their favor. They're about to push hard on the Charge. They got their sound barrier up. The Charge ult economy is just not as good. They just need 8 more meters and they're going to win this thing. You know, they're really pushing it. Arrow's in a good position. He finds a big kill on Dezernius, but as you can see, time's about to run out. The bot is still down there, and there is no one touching it. Everyone tunnel visioned onto this bridge here, and they end up losing. And you can see right here, this reaction says it all. Like, this is a devastating C9. Like, there is no one there. They are not focused at all on the objective, which is, you know, the most important thing in the game. But yeah, this face, you could tell, absolutely devastated Arrow and probably the rest of their team. And I'm just hoping their mental is okay after something like that. You're doing so well in your game against the Charge. There's actually a chance you can win this game, like win the series. If you don't C9 here, there's a good chance they could probably win this map, send this to map 5 with all of the momentum and reverse sweep. But this ruined everything, and I'm kind of wondering where their heads are at, and I'm just praying that they can continue to play how we've seen them so far in week 2. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with how they did overall. To push Guangzhou Charge like that is no joke, and their players are showing that they are still OWL ready, and that they're ready to make the redemption happen, and that some of their other guys are trying to make a push to be potential rookies in the near future. So good on them, really. I'm proud of those guys as well. Just like Sin Priza and O2 Blast, they all had very positive weekends for the Tier 2 fans out there. But now we're going to shift our focus more towards a couple of Overwatch League teams. We brought up the bright points of the Tier 2 teams, but now we got to talk about the points of interest with teams like Seoul Dynasty and Dallas Fuel, I think. Seoul Dynasty we're talking about mostly because they are making a bit of a substitution change with their roster, as Prophet is currently dealing with some health issues. So he's going to be focusing on his recovery. He'll take a break to focus on his mental health. He doesn't say that here, but he did specify that's the reason on his Discord to his fans, I believe. He said that he just needs a break, and he should be back for the second half of the season. He just needs to chill for a while. And in his place, they signed Sun Jun, who has a similar hero pool to him. He is a flex DPS player, and he's pretty impressive, honestly. He's not just a person with high potential, but I think he fills out Prophet's role pretty well. He's showing that he's motivated and that he might be able to help this team win a bit more in the present, and that he can help maybe be a better piece in the future when Prophet comes back. They can make for a good rotation. They maybe don't always have to run PH, as they call him, for Sombra. Maybe they can put Prophet or Sun Jun on it instead. That is yet to be decided. But I think he's giving the Dynasty a bit of an energy boost. I mean, it's nothing major that's going to help them win some big games. I don't think they're a good enough team right now to be beating any of the good teams. But you can tell they just look a bit more awake. And it might not have to do with Prophet being washed. I think it's more just a mindset thing. This is like a fresh, young guy with a lot of motivation to prove himself. Prophet is burnt out right now. He's been playing the game for like 7 years. So it's just a good change of pace, and I think Prophet with a break could make their mindset even better. It's just a simple thing like that that can make all the difference. When you have 5 guys that are all in tune, all motivated to play, it's better than 4. I hope Prophet gets well soon, though, but I think right now Dynasty are in good hands, and this is like a fun potential player that could lead them into their future to watch out for. Sun Jun seems like he is a solid contributor. Like, he just joined the team recently, but he's already putting in some good work for them. I was impressed with how he did both in the Rhodes game and in the Spark matchup despite the loss. Like, he's coming as the new guy and is looking like one of their playmaking leaders, which is awesome, and which is why, again, I'm excited to maybe see him and Prophet be a combination of sorts, a duo that could be really good in the second half of this year if Prophet does indeed keep his promise and come back. Now, I say if because, we've seen other people burn out before. Prophet's never actually burnt out once in his career. This is like the first time. So I don't really know if he still wants to play that much. Like, what's his motivation going to be like? Is he going to recognize something about himself during this time off that he maybe wants to move on? There's a chance. I'd assume he's coming back, but just something to keep in mind, Maybe a burnout like this, at the very least, is a sign that he may not be in the league after this season. Maybe that's his warning sign that he needs to get out of Overwatch and do something else. And can you really blame the guy? He's been playing this game competitively since 2017. Like, he's had a longer career than most people. He's been playing this game since the road to Apex in April 2017. If I was him, I'd feel burnt out if I had to play Overwatch professionally for 6 straight years. I mean, who can blame the guy? Honestly, it's more impressive that it took him this long to burn out, really. Like, that's a very long time to go without feeling like you need a break, that you can just keep going. That you could push for 6 years constantly like that and build this kind of resume. It's impressive on his end, and I can't blame him for being burnt out. And I just wish for him to get a speedy recovery so he can come back and make the Dynasty be at their full potential, as I think they have a better DPS line with him there. Like, at least with a better mindset. For now, though, it'll be on Sun Jun to pick up the slack, and I think he has what it takes to do that, to at least make Dynasty what they already were, if not better. The other team, though, Dallas Fuel, I think are in the headlines for one specific reason, and that is their change of strategy. It seems like Coach Rush may be cooking something up again over there. It seems like he might have found his meta-defining strategy. Not really meta-defining, but you know what I mean. Coach Rush always finds those strats that are different than most, and it happens to be the Moira again. Dallas Fuel are rocking Moira in 2023 consistently, along with like Hanbin on the Ramatra. This seems to be their comfort pick. They want to play full-on Rush, pocketing Hanbin, and also putting MCD on more of a comfort pick in a way. As Moira was something, I use this word loosely, Moira something he dominated on Element Mystic, with Rush's team and Sparkle and Hanbin in the 2019 Gauntlet back in the day. He played a pivotal part in being a solid flex support for them during that time. And maybe that'll help him just be a better player, Maybe this is what Dallas needs, to stop emphasizing the things they're not good at and just play the things that they're comfortable on, ride or die, whether it works or not, just go for it, really. I don't think it's the best strategy in the world, and I think it could get exposed against some of these other better teams out there. But at least they're showing that it's, more impactful and they look more competent on it than other things they play, like the Winston, for example. Have Hanbin play the things he can dominate on mechanically. I think that's a smart thing to do. And then have MCD maybe throw a little less. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but have MCD be more in his wheelhouse, so to speak. This Moira strat just feels, very weird. Because Moira is like one of the worst supports in the entire game, if not the worst, outside of like Lifeweaver, of course, just because she doesn't really have any utility. She heals a lot, but that's basically all she brings to the table, so she's seen as a weaker support. But if Dallas make it work, I wouldn't be surprised. If there's one team that can make a Moira work that we've seen throughout history, it is definitely Rush-led teams. So we can't underestimate the Dallas Fuel too much, but they will play the Seoul Infernal next week, which will be the real test. Beating Sin Prizza doesn't prove much of anything. How they do against Seoul Infernal with this kind of comp will be the indicator on where they stand, and if they can make some sort of comeback and make some sort of tournament run to show they are far from dead. I don't know what to expect. My expectations aren't that high, but my curiosity in them, I should say, is definitely increasing. It's the highest it has been since the preseason, really. Like, this is an interesting new chapter that they're moving into. and I'd like to see if they can be more of what we thought they'd be, at the very least. Even if they don't beat Seoul Infernal, I want to see them put up a fight. Like, please, don't go down so easily. Try and surprise us, Dallas. Show us why you're champions. That's all I ask of you. Other than that, that's basically the rundown of my thoughts on the East and like the major things I noticed. Tier 2 is making me very happy. I like how they're playing. They're giving us reason to pay attention to them, and I'm excited to see how week 2 of the knockouts go very, very soon this Saturday, so stay tuned for that. Now we can check in on the West, though, which was not as interesting like I mentioned before, but there were some learning points and things I definitely wanted to talk about. First things first, I think we should probably do a quick Shock check-in. They have been the talk of the town for weeks now in terms of their disappointing performances and people being worried about them. Are they overrated? Blah, blah, blah. So let's discuss them and how they have done. So they started off their week by playing the Houston Outlaws, and they showed improvement early on. The first half of this series in particular was pretty back and forth. Shock and Outlaws trading blow for blow, showing that maybe Shock are starting to get right in the back track. They're getting back on the right track again. I apologize. But then the second half of the series, they kind of got boomed. It started off okay on Shambali. It looked like they had a chance to maybe win this map until the Outlaw support line completely boomed them. I mean, Violet and Shu flipped this map on its head. Shock were having such a great defense, and then those two absolutely ruined them, and the Outlaws proceeded to snowball them, then hold them on a defense of their own, and that was that. And that's kind of the turning point of the series and how it ended, really. The Houston backline boomed them. They were close. They were so close. They did so well on King's Row to hold off the Outlaws and turn the tide of this series, just for the Outlaws to push them right back into place, and then beat them with a Doomfist of all things on Caliseo, which is maybe not the best look. But regardless, there still was progress, and I think that's what people were happy about, at least the Shock fans were. It was something. They at least kind of pushed one of the best teams in the league, which is a good sign, and then things immediately fell right back down to earth. It's like all the progress they had was lost, and they put all of their focus just into the Outlaws game, because the Valiant matchup was anything but pretty, and I think it's because of a match like this that people are starting to get very scared for Shock and saying they might be one of the most overrated teams ever. Obviously, the second half of this series went the way that it should have. Shock dominated, but it's the first half of the series that people are going to look at that make you question everything. How could the Shock drop a game to the Valiant? How could they lose a map to them? How could they look so incompetent? How could Blizzard World be so sloppy? Like, these were all big problems. Seriously. They had they had control, it felt like, at first, but then they continued to push this comp that didn't work, and Valiant made them pay for it. Seeker was doing whatever he wanted. Proper couldn't carry, and it almost felt like that might push into Blizzard World, but eventually they woke up. Proper got pissed off. He carried on Genji, and that was that. Like, it took Proper playing out of his mind to beat the Valiant, which is a terrifying thought. He had to go all in to make sure that this series didn't slip away. Not a good look from the Shock at all. Not at all. And in terms of things I noticed, just with how they played this week, I think the big thing, the most notable thing, was this Ramatra comp with Proper on the Sombra and also Heesang on the Mei. That was like something they're really trying to force. We've seen other teams play it, but you could tell it's just not something the Shock are comfortable playing. And it makes you think maybe they need to stop forcing what doesn't work and play more of their comfort. Maybe focus more on their aggressive dive, which just seems stronger, which gives teams a bigger problem than what we've seen when they rock with these other meta comps trying to be a slave to it. It's just not their style. It just doesn't work with where they're currently at as a team. Proper on carry heroes and Junbin stability is for the best right now, I'd say. And that's what they should be trying to rock with a bit more if they want to be more consistent and finish off their stage strong. Speaking of Proper, he's the only one doing anything right now. I mean, I know this isn't like any shocking news by any stretch, but the fact that he's not getting any help is very, 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 very sad and concerning, and it makes me question everything in life. What happens to giving proper help during the offseason? What happened to giving him a better team that would help him realize his full potential, have good guys around him to give him the proper support to, well, no pun intended there, but give him the support he needed to finish the job, not choke into map 7 and win a grand finals? You'd think that with a fully Korean core, with guys he's dominated with before, would do well, but they're doing worse than the mixed roster they had 1 year prior. Is it a coaching thing? Is it the certain players not mixing well at this core? Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, you can only make excuses for so many weeks, right? We made excuses that they aren't a good player facility, they're in Korea, all these things, blah, blah, blah. But now we're at a point where we've reached a limit. How many more excuses can we make for this team? I don't think we have any more to make. I'm going to take the L for rating the Shock as high as I did. I know it's still early, but there's really not that many weeks in this season to look for. So we kind of have to face the facts that they are overrated, at least for the time being. It was a huge mistake to rate them as high as me and some other people did. I regret putting them at number 1. And I regret even saying that they're a top tier team right now because they're making me look very dumb. There's still a lot of time for the Shock to improve and be more respectable, and maybe slowly but surely they can work their way back up to being in that tier. But almost 8 games into the season like this is a problem. So it makes you wonder, what exactly is the issue with San Francisco? We're talking about how Proper needs help and how they're not playing well at these comps, but why? What is it in the game that makes them play so badly? Well, I think the first thing is probably Vindame, right? That might be the most notable player of which that has been causing major issues within the Shock and their team fights and their abilities to take them. This guy looks trash, man. I don't know what happened to the guy that I saw in Seoul Dynasty last year, but it looks like a completely different player when I watch him play. Both in the Outlaw series and even in this Valiant series, there were so many times where he was getting picked off before fights would even start. Like, he's on his signature hero, Brigitte, and he's playing his Lucio and stuff, and he's dying so early. The Shock have no chance of even beginning their fights, and they have to depend on Proper in like these constant 4v5s, and it's absolutely ridiculous. Vindame looks completely lost. He is not in sync with anybody else on his team. He's maybe a bit too over-aggressive. His positioning has been all over the place. What is the deal? Why is he not sticking well with a team that he's worked with before? What is it? Is he suffering without Toby's coaching, perhaps? Was he the key? Was Toby, keeping him from making all these major mistakes? Like, he kept him more disciplined than somebody like Krusty? I don't really know, but regardless, Vindame has been a major exploitable weakness of the Shock team, and he likely will continue to be a major exploitable weakness until he figures some stuff out. But in his defense, he's definitely not the only problem. I think the tank rotation has obviously not been working out. I think I saw a stat somewhere that Max has only won one of the 8 maps he's played or whatever, 9 maps, 10 maps. And then Junbin has won all of the others and is basically the reason the Shock are winning games. I mean, the team just looks significantly worse with Max in the game. Let's not beat around the bush. It's not all of his fault by any stretch, but it's something we can observe. It's pretty obvious just based off of the stats and how they play with specific compositions. These Max-favored compositions always seem to fail, right? It's just a comfort thing, really, more than anything else. So don't be too hard on Max. I just think in general they feel lost and uncomfortable when they're not on those comfort picks. When they're trying to force these rush comps and these Max favored comps that they're just not quite as strong on compared to the dive compositions. They feel very uncomfortable and lost, and the communication looks bad, and the backline's dying too much. And it's just all making it way harder for the Shock to take and win fights when they're so disorganized. Like, Proper can only do so much when the team around him is folding consistently, you feel me? They're getting diffed as a complete unit right now. A couple of their guys need to play better, and the coaching needs to step it up too. Improvement has to happen, and it has to happen soon, because it's not like we're still early in the season. We're almost halfway through now, and the Shock still feel like they aren't clicking. They aren't getting better. They're still having a lot of those moments of weakness. Just taking a sip of water. Sorry, guys. So I'm wondering now if it's a coaching thing, now that I think about it, as I'm sipping my water, being mad at the Shock. We're talking about how they're getting diffed as a team, so that probably slightly has to do with how the coaching's done, no? I'm starting to wonder if Krusty can coach these guys and if his system is the right fit for the O2 Blast core. Is like the system too different for people like Vindame and Max? Like, is it something they're not used to and they can't get used to? I don't know what the issue is. The Shock are just all out of sorts from top to bottom, and there's a question on if it's ever going to get fixed with how they're playing right now. Something just feels off. They're in their own heads, and I have a lot of doubts. And with Boston and Florida up next week on their schedule, it ain't looking good to show improvement in the short term, guys. Like, maybe in the long term, sure. But here, through midseason madness, it's looking bad. Like, they're probably going to make knockouts just by default because there are a lot of teams that aren't playing well. But they're probably not going to go far. And I'm expecting them to be a low seed because Boston, while it is potentially winnable, they're still going to be the underdogs in that. And obviously they're the underdogs in the Mayhem game as well. This is going to be the Shock's last opportunity before the knockouts to show us they can fight with the big dogs and that they're not to be underestimated. If they don't at least show a little bit of improvement, we are all going to be screaming that they're overhyped and probably one of the most overhyped teams of all time. A potential 3-5 start with a few very bad wins will put the Shock in one of their worst starts of all time, probably the second worst, only behind 2018. I'm not trying to hate on the Shock, but I have to be hard on them just because of their expectations. We have to be critical of how they've done when they're supposed to be so much more, when they have all the right pieces right there to be a very great team. It's just not working right now. It's not clicking. Not all the pieces are fitting together. Something's missing, and I don't know what they're going to do to change it. I don't know if they sign another player. I don't know if they get another coach, or if they start playing different team compositions. They throw out different rotations with their lineup. I don't know what the answer is, but Shock, figure your stuff out. Don't let the season end like this. I beg of you to figure things out and not just be a okay team from start to finish this year. Don't waste a year of Proper's career, man. Please do not. Outside of the Shock, though, I think another team that has been very concerning thus far in Season 6 is the Toronto Defiant. I think they also need to step it up big time. They were also a team with major expectations this season, and so far they've been a letdown. A lot of their games that they could have won, they have lost. They currently sit at 2-4 with a -4 map differential. Honestly, they almost lost to NYXL, so they realistically could be 1-5 right now. They haven't put up much of a fight against any of the solid teams. Like, the best they did was pushing Shock to map 5, but Shock are showing they're weak right now, so it's not impressive. Against Gladiators, against Boston, they just haven't looked right. Against Mayhem as well, it's very disappointing. And right now it feels like even Vancouver are better than them, Washington. Toronto are on the decline, and they look potentially like a bottom 5 team in the West right now, which is It's shocking, to say the least. We thought this team would be way more with an American Tornado core. I just don't want them to be mid again, man. I don't think we can take it. I don't think the fans can take it. They deserve more at this point with how patiently they've waited. This is the promised team that was supposed to change the outcome of what they've been for most of their history, and it doesn't seem like they have the solution yet. And I think that the biggest reason why Defiant maybe haven't been playing as well as they should is because there might be a DPS problem. I think the team is lacking a consistent source of playmaking at the DPS role, I should say. They're lacking consistency outside of Hydron. I think he does well, but when he has to flex onto Sombra, it's not as good. And when the flex DPS situation is all over the place, it makes it even harder. There's only so much Hydron and Ultraviolet can do on their own. The rest of the team needs to stay up and just do their thing, make plays happen as well, and they're not. And I think a large part of it is because of the disappointing things that have been happening with their flex DPS. Speedily in particular has not been living up to his potential. I had a lot of hope for him. People have been hyping him up for years now, and he just hasn't been able to do much at the Overwatch League level. You can't just one-trick Echo and hope for the best, you know? You gotta be able to play what's needed, and so far he is not. And I'm wondering if he's the answer for them there, and if it was a good idea for him to even be on Team USA, amongst other things. He's got a lot to prove right now heading into the second half of this season. His team needs him, and he is letting them down. And now I'm starting to think that maybe, they should start playing Sam more. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just having some recency bias here. But when Sam played in the Boston series, I thought that he looked better. I genuinely thought that he gave the team more of a spark of life off the bench. He actually started at the beginning of this game, and the maps that he played on were the ones that Defiant were the most competitive on. He looked good on King's Row, and he looked good on Nepal. He put in a lot of work, and in the words of Uber, he was, Scrimbuck Sammy or whatever it was. Maybe a bit of an insulting term for him, but still, can't help but agree that he looked really good out there and gave them a good jolt of life. Sam might be the guy they should experiment with more. Like, try incorporating him more into your starting lineup. I understand there are certain things that he cannot play. Like, obviously, he can't play Tracer, and if you have Hydron and Hitscan, then by default, Speedily's got to play the Tracer. But maybe you can avoid that and try and find a different way to approach things. You know, there's other ways to get around it. You can play up to your comfort picks and go from there. There's no shame in that, especially with how you're playing right now. Sam just might be the way to give you the energy you need to be that more energized team, that fun team that we all know you can be. I also think, though, on top of Sam, that maybe OG needs to step it up as well, right? I think that he has been pretty mid, probably one of the worst main supports out there so far. He's also been letting his partner down in Ultraviolet, who's been carrying and doing a lot of the work himself. And I'm really hoping Majed can get there soon. This team clearly needs him to also bring a spark of life, just like Sam is doing right now, with his mechanics and great flex support play. Having OG play things like the Kiriko and the BAP is not working out. Even as Lucio doesn't look that great. They need Majed in there just to have another option, I feel. Just to send teams different looks and to have less exploitable weaknesses out there. Majed needs his visa ASAP. It is insane that he's being caught with the visa problems for a second season in a row. When is this guy going to catch a break? Like, for real, for real. When can he get freed and be in Toronto? Please let it be soon. I am begging you. Yeah, though, I think Defiant, they are in a really rough spot, just like the Shock. They're probably the two most concerning teams in the West right now for me that had high expectations. On the other side of the spectrum, though, in terms of low expectations, I'd say the Vancouver Titans have continued to impress us so far. The Spitfire game, they looked excellent. Spitfire have looked worse than we thought, or at least how I've thought. But regardless, they destroyed them pretty easily. And in the Gladiators game, they gave them one hell of a fight. They lost this series, but it felt like a very close 3-1. It went about how I expected, but I'm glad it went how I expected it to, because that shows us the Titans can consistently punch above their weight class and be a scary dark horse for even some of the top teams in the West to deal with. They are no joke. This is the kind of performance they needed to have. You know, they've gotten blown out in some of their other opportunities, so this was a good chance to show us that they're improving fast, they're gaining confidence, and they pushed the Gladiators to the brink, really. They won the first map. It was extremely close. Blizzard World was back and forth for a while. Havana, that was a really tough map. There was a chance where they could have maybe held the Gladiators early on. Didn't work in their favor. Kind of ran out of steam in the second half of this series. But it was mostly just an execution thing more than anything else. There weren't a lot of major problems on their side that make you upset, that make you wonder if they have what it takes to be one of those scary underdogs. None of that is a problem. It's just the execution. If they can improve on that, you know, look at the film, have their coaching improve them, show individual improvement throughout the season, some of these games are probably going to start to fall their way, you'd have to assume. With how Faith is playing as arguably the league's most improved player, with how clutch Crimzo looks on flex support, with how crazy Sugar Free is, and Punk, and Aspire, they have something figured out over there, and they're changing things on the fly and making more improvements, which is what I appreciate. They found something with this change to Sugar Free on Sombra, and then Aspire on Tracer. It is working wonders for them. I didn't think it would because, you know, Sugar Free has proven to be an excellent Tracer, but this seems to be the thing that benefits the team as a whole by making him go Sombra, because for one, his Sombra looks amazing. He's looking like one of the better Western Sombras from what I've seen so far, but two, Aspire feels more comfortable too. Having him play the Tracer instead of the Sombra just means he is going to be a better player. Tracer has always been one of his signature heroes along with the Widowmaker, so this is a good change of pace for him. It lets him be more of a contributor, and it lets your DPS line play more up to their full potential rather than just one of their guys. It is a great change, and I'm happy the Titans are doing it. They proved me wrong very quickly, and I'm glad. They look great, man. I am excited to see what they can do in the knockouts. They are a scary team to deal with. And in a rematch with Gladiators, you never know what might happen, you feel me? I think that the Titans are a fun team. And for the first time in, 4 years, I'd say? Like, first time since, like, early 2020, the Titans are the more exciting Canadian team, so good for you, Titans fans. You're finally on the rise again after what seems like an eternity, so congrats. On the other hand, though, a team that is very much not on the rise but is on the decline is most definitely the London Spitfire. Because, oh man, they look bad. I mean, they look awful. They might be the worst team aside from Vegas Eternal right now. Genuinely, the Valiant are showing us more fight and they look more exciting and inspirational than what the Spitfire have done so far. I know they took a map against Houston, which is cool and all, but it took the Outlaws absolutely throwing for them to win this map. Outlaws were playing throw comps that they probably shouldn't have played. They were experimenting because the rest of the series was just pretty bad. I mean, New Queen Street was like okay, but Outlaws were in control for most of it. They were flexing with Gargoyle on Zarya for crying out loud. Like, they were basically doing a speed run on Blizzard World. London had no answer whatsoever in this series, and how they played in the Titan series was also very, very disappointing. I've been trying so hard to defend this Spitfire team and give them a chance because of what they did last year. You know, they have the coaching, they still have the core, but they're not getting any better. They're just not. They're actually getting worse. They look more uninspirational as the weeks go on. The mistakes are piling up. They look terrible. Flexibility is getting exposed big time on this squad. Outside of Rhine comps, they look uncomfortable. Their dive is bad. Their double flex support is bad. And funny enough, Hadi is far from the biggest problem, even though they look uncomfortable off these Rhine comps. Like, he's not playing the greatest, sure. But even on Diva and things like that, he's trying his best and is genuinely not playing that bad individually. He's actually done as much as he can in some of these scenarios. I think the real problem has been these Lethal and Skyripple lineups. Those are the issue. They seem to be the guys that disrupt everything, and it makes the team play worse. They contribute so little in these games, and they die so often. Like, if Lethal and Skyripple have been the best lineup for them in certain maps during scrims that we're seeing them get subbed into, I would be really worried as a London fan. Like, from my point of view, it's just not worth it to play them at all. Like, is this the best result you're showing in scrims with these guys in there? Is it a comfort thing? I just don't understand. Those guys die all the freaking time. Lethal's dying randomly for no reason on Tracer of all things, just over and over again to Winston, to everything. And Skyrip is so over-aggressive, and he's not on the same page with his team. He's making the lives of Landon, and I don't really think he plays with Admiral, but the lives of his support players harder as well. It's brutal out there, man. It is brutal to watch the London Spitfire play. Like, they're making all sorts of substitution errors. They're losing the games before they even start. The individual mistakes continue to pile up. I saw Sparker literally just like run into a Dragon Strike the other day. Like, it's everyone is being infected with this stupidity right now, and I just can't believe it. It feels so weird. I'm not trying to hate. It's just really frustrating to watch this team play, and anyone who watched my co-streams would probably kind of understand that. They'd know. They've seen it firsthand. I mauled when I watched the Spitfire play because I know they can be way better than what they're showing us, and they're not. They look terrible. They look so uninspiring, so lackluster, like they just don't even want to be there. Just changing away from what they know and love is costing them. I mean, people are out here missing Shax and Khan when they barely even played. Like, that's how bad it's getting. They're missing those guys when they are long gone, because that is how little Lethal and Skyrep are doing for this team. They got to go back to basics, man. Even if it's like they don't even have to play the rush. I think generally they'd just be better off playing Backbone and Sparker most of the time, keeping Admiral in the game alongside your boy Landon. That's what you got to do. That's what made you good last year. Stick with that core. They synergize the best. Even if you have to sacrifice some flexibility, it might just be worth it from like a synergy point of view. You'll have more fights to take even if you lose them. You're not going to feed as often. You're not going to make as many mistakes. Like, genuinely, I'd be happier if Sparker played Tracer and they had Backbone play Sombra. I'd be happier in that regard. I mean, hell, I'd rather even have Backbone at Tracer at this point, even if it's not something he's very good at. Just do it, man. Just do it. It's not like you're going to be any worse. You're probably going to be about the same at this point. I know I'm kind of just an armchair analyst Andy, but still, that's how I see it. Your team looks worse without some of your leaders in there, and something's got to give. And for the love of God, please stop subbing out Sparker. I am begging you not to sub this guy out of the game. They subbed him out, and it was just the most ridiculous, stupid thing I've ever seen. He is your carry at DPS. Why is he out of the game? There's literally never a reason to have him out of the game. He's the best chance you have by far. Keep him in Backbone in and go from there. Stick to what you know. and see what happens, London fans. I think that you really need to pray for a better meta at this point. Otherwise, the Spitfire might end up being one of the worst teams in the West by far. I mean, right now they are, and we're at the point where people might even take the Valiant over them. They're 1-5, -8 map differential. They choked away potential opportunities in like their close game against Boston, for example. And I don't really know if there's any chance for them to get through this midseason madness knockout cutoff. I don't know if they're going to win any other games, which we can talk about in a few moments. Like, that's where we're at right now with them. They look that terrible, and I feel awful for ranking them as high as I did. Like, I put them over Charge and Justice and Titans and all these teams when they are just significantly worse. Not being able to play their comfort picks has seriously destroyed their confidence, and I'm wondering what's next for the Spitfire squad. Can a meta change / a patch change be their savior, or are they done for? I'm leaning towards the latter of which, but I'm hoping for the best. So that basically does it for week 4, though. I think those are the major points of interest that I wanted to get to. The major headlines from both regions. That's kind of where I stand. That's where I'm unhappy. That's where I'm happy. So now we can look towards the future. Week 5, which is going to start on Friday, May 26th, 2023. And the first thing is that we're going to get week 2 of the East knockouts, which I can show you really quick. If we go to spring knockouts. So we're going to have week 2. We're going to have Dreamers play Dynasty, Rhodes versus Pokerface. In upper bracket, you got Spark versus Charge, Dallas versus Infernal, Panthera and SBG, Shanghai and O2 Blast. Lots of fun matches to look forward to. We're also going to get a losers round 3 from both sides, where the winners of these games and the winners of these games will play. Should be a lot of fun. We're basically just in the O2 Blast versus Seoul Infernal rematch waiting room, I'd say. And then maybe people are excited about Spark versus Charge. But yeah, that's where we currently stand there. A lot of teams are fighting for their lives. Some are trying to punch their tickets to the grand finals. Should be a really fun week, especially if week 1 was any sort of indicator. Well, week 1 of the knockouts, I should say. Over in the Western Conference, we have a lot of top seeds still up for grabs. Actually, both of them, I should say. Both top seeds to automatically qualify for midseason madness are up there. Of the 4 teams in the West, they'll automatically make it. Right now, the Reign and the Outlaws are in the lead for first. The Reign are undefeated with an amazing map differential, and it's looking like there's a great chance Reign will snag that 1 seed, but both spots are definitely up for grabs because of some of the matchups we have ahead of ourselves. You got the Reign versus the Outlaws. That could be a huge indicator. You got the Mayhem, or not the Reign versus the Outlaws, excuse me. You have the Reign versus the Uprising, and then you have the Outlaws versus the Mayhem. 2 really big games that could decide who gets the 1 and the 2 spots respectively. They're both really important matches, and it feels like Atlanta and Houston will be favored in those, but you never know what could happen. You never know. All it takes is 1 upset, and things could get completely wild over there. As it's not like Atlanta Reign have that big of a lead. Their map differential's great, and I mean, they play Vegas Eternal, so they should at least get up to 7 wins. But a lot of these other guys could get 7 wins too. Anything's possible out there, man. Outside of that, it's looking like we mostly have the Western Knockouts playoff picture. Well, not playoff. The Western Knockout round picture all wrapped up. Most of these teams have basically already clinched. It's really just Defiant, New York, and London fighting for their lives at this point. They're all trying to avoid the cutoff. 2 spots are up for grabs. One of these teams will not make it. In all likelihood, it will not be London, just because London have a pretty brutal schedule ahead of them. And I don't think they're going to win either of their games, so by default, Defiant and New York should be okay. Whether or not they deserve it doesn't really matter. They're going to have enough wins to make the cutoff, it would seem. That's where we're kind of at in terms of the picture and what to look forward to in the West. Aside from the big matchups, like I said, with Reign Boston and then Outlaws Mayhem, Gladiators versus Justice is going to happen. That could potentially be the game of the week. That could be an absolute banger. Also, it's going to be a major week for the Shock. Aside from trying to show improvement, they play Boston and the Florida Mayhem, as I talked about earlier. There's a lot going on there. 2 big-time opportunities to show that there's still a chance for them to have some life. If not, they're going to be looking very poor heading into the knockouts, which are going to start the week after this one. Week 6, West knockouts will begin. This is the final week of qualifiers, which means we are just about halfway through Season 6 already, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to be like officially done till like the end of Mid-Season Madness, of course, which is like middle of June. But we're getting there. We're almost done with half of the regular season games, so to speak. That's pretty crazy how fast the season's going by. It's been exciting, it's been fast-paced, and interesting, lots of surprising results, and I cannot wait to see what comes next, and I hope you guys are excited as well. But yeah, that's basically it, ladies and gentlemen. Not quite an hour this week around, but that's mostly everything I wanted to talk about. APAC was fun. The West was not as fun, kind of more as expected, but still some good learning and talking points for sure. Let me know what you thought about Week 4 down in the comments below, what you're thinking of heading into Week 5, and any suggestions you might have for the podcast moving forward. I'm going to try my best to maybe get some guests in the near future. I want to try to invite, some bigger people onto the scene, maybe casters, maybe players, GMs, coaches. I'm going to see what I can do. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Give this a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new and if you want more podcast episodes just like this every single week. And until the next one, guys, I'm out of here. Peace.